afternoon, and thank you for joining the discussion on diversity and inclusion in tech. I'm Carolyn Byer, and I am going to be hosting this session with you today. Before I actually introduce I want to actually share a little bit of context. When we think of diversity and inclusion, it isn't really a trending topic anymore. It's actually an imperative. We need to keep focus on diversity, but I think a lot of people are now waking up that without inclusion, diversity is a really leaky sieve. We have a saying at Microsoft that I go where I'm invited, but I stay where I'm welcomed. It's not just about bringing diverse talent into your organization. It's really about creating a culture that people feel welcomed, that they belong, and that they can contribute along the way. But it also requires a lot of us to be actively involved in that. It starts with awareness and really examining ourselves and our own assumptions and reactions. It's really fueled by curiosity, the ability to really act inclusively and really understand another person's point of view or perspective. And it also takes a lot of courage because sometimes these are uncomfortable conversations, and it really does involve taking some personal risk-taking. And when we do come together, our collective efforts really do help people feel valued and included, and it creates the environment we actually bring our whole selves to. To be super candid is challenging on a really good day. There's going to obviously be some sure mistakes, and there's going to be some hard learned lessons. At Microsoft, we invest in and recommit to diversity and inclusion because it's really fundamental to our mission. And when we're focused on empowering the 7 billion people on the planet, the question isn't why for us at Microsoft. Instead, it's rather how. How are we being more diverse and inclusive today than yesterday? And what more can we do? We actually seek them out and bring them in because we actually believe that there's a lot of collective power. As a result, at Microsoft, our ideas are better, our products are better, and we feel like we can better serve our customers. Creating a truly inclusive environment for women also just doesn't happen overnight. It actually takes a conscious effort at the highest levels to ensure that we're growing women in leadership and board positions. And when we look at the stats, we see that only 31% of jobs within the tech sector are held by women. Only 23% of management roles in the industry are filled by women. And the reality is we really have a issue in Canada, particularly in fields like AI and machine learning, virtual and augmented reality, and cyber security. These are precisely the fields that hold the most potential for us when we're thinking of Canada's digital future. And so in order to really build a pipeline of qualified women, we must give girls and women and other unrepresented groups access to STEM learning tools both inside and outside of schools. So on that note, that I have with me today to also share their perspective on this. So we have Holly Peck, who's the Director of Creative Services at Soul Machine. We have Kristina Balaam, which is a Senior Security Intelligence Engineer at Lookout. We have Naila Moloo, and she is an innovator, sustainable energy enthusiastic, and author from the Knowledge Society. But before I ask my first question, so please feel free to ask some questions in there, and we'll have some time at the end to talk about it. So my first question today is for Holly. Holly, success in the technical career can often depend on mentorship, allyship, and a strong support network. Holly is you're a founder and director of Women Who Code in Vancouver. What changes are you seeing in the industry, and what are your thoughts on inspiring women to pursue careers in tech?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I actually see it from a multivalent vantage point, both being, an AI director at an AI company, and also kind of a community builder of women in hard engineering, like computer science, data science, and, computer vision, and all of the wonderful subcategories of AI. So what I'm seeing as trends is, the avenue of non-traditional coders into technology, or non-traditional, folks interested in pursuing technical careers, and that to me is very very exciting. Even though I'm an engineering director, I actually have a very non-traditional pathway into technology. I always joke that I'm an anthropologist turned roboticist who happened to work in a humanoid robotics lab 7 years out of school. So I think kind of the emergence of people who are really interested in building products and building tools, building the tools that govern society without maybe a traditional computer science background is really is a trend I'm seeing. And kind of co-located around this is, of course, the emergence of boot camps and engineering fellowships geared toward increasing accessibility of non-traditional engineers into computer science and engineering. We are also seeing kind of the emergence of community groups, and this is important to me and was actually the impetus for launching and founding Women Who Code Vancouver at Microsoft. So Microsoft has always been a very big proponent and supporter of our organization, but this need to create safe spaces for women and LGBTQ identifying folks, maybe non-binary engineers, to knowledge share, to practice giving technical presentations, to have access to learning opportunities, to level up their technical toolkit. And so we're also seeing the emergence of these groups, and also the emergence of mentorship programs as well, which is fantastic because this is really important, as we know, to keep women in those engineering roles. So we know, the data shows, unfortunately, that more than half of women, in engineering roles or in tech roles actually leave the industry before their midpoint career. And this is really difficult to, widening and broadening the funnel for getting women into those management roles. So this is primarily the reason why Women Who Code was created. We're the largest technical organization for women in the world, and we're really driving home this mission to mentor women, create safe spaces for women in technical careers, and to keep women in engineering.
Holly, thanks for sharing that. What I love, and what you said there, is it's never too late, right? And I love your story that you didn't start out in that space. But what I also love is this notion of support, right? And then how do you bring together and create places, safe places for women to come together and sort of get the support they need. So thank you very much. I'm going to pass it now over to Kristina. Obviously, Holly touched upon the importance of mentorship and allyship. And Kristina, I'm just so curious, in your own experience, how has that played out for you? And then what advice would you have for other women exploring careers in male-dominated fields?
That's such a great question. So interestingly enough, mentorship has played such a huge role in my career. I can honestly say that I would not be where I am today without mentors and allies that helped me get here. I actually ended up getting into security because I found the blog of a coworker when I was back at Shopify who had written about his experience doing an online certificate program in security. And I realized he actually went to Shopify. I didn't notice that at first when I saw his blog. And I said, hey, can I take you out for lunch and just pick your brain about what your role is like and how you got here and what led you to this particular point in your career? And from there, that kind of evolved into a discussion about my career aspirations and my interest in security, and actually led to me joining his team at Shopify, moving laterally within the company to work with him. And that sort of started me off into security. That was application security. And then from there, I actually found another mentor who taught me a fair bit about malware research. And I went to a couple of conferences and I networked with some people, and I found in particular, some women who are working in the malware space and said, hey, this is something else that I've been really interested in. Can you tell me a bit about what your role involves? And just from having all of those individual conversations, I was able to really progress from kind of being in a more general space that I enjoyed, but I wasn't quite as passionate about, and moving into what I, ended up being my ideal role in malware research. And I really attribute that to the people that took the time to have a coffee with me and answer my questions, and even in some cases just advocate for me. Encouraging me to go speak somewhere or giving me a conference ticket if they had an extra one, those situations. So whenever I'm asked, how did you get into the security space? How do I get my foot in that door, especially for groups that are really underrepresented in cybersecurity? I think at this point, it's only about 11% of the cybersecurity industry is made up of women. So we're very, very short staffed, not only for engineers, but also especially for female engineers. And I really think that it boils down to not being afraid to reach out, and whether it's on social media nowadays, because we're all kind of limited with how we can interact with people and seeing people at conferences. But however it is, if you find somebody that their job looks interesting to you and you're really curious about the kind of work that they're doing and you want to kind of know more and see if it's something you would be interested in pursuing, definitely reach out to them. I would say that 99% of people would be more than happy to answer your questions, and they remember what it was like to be in your shoes and looking for advice. So I would definitely say reach out to those people, and don't be afraid to ask questions, and kind of see where it takes you, because if you don't ask, you don't actually know. So.
Thank you for sharing that. It's so funny when I sort of think back on my own career. I was probably had a fear of doing that, and then as I got older and more, not set in my ways, but more comfortable with myself, I actually have learned sort of being able to sort of reach out and ask questions and be so curious has made such a difference in me. It was actually humbling. And I used to probably tell myself, well, why would someone want to talk to me? Which is really silly, because it's something I'm telling myself. But when more and more, and to your point, Kristina, the more and more that you did that, the more, impactful it became, and really sort of set you off. So thank you for sharing that. It's a really great tip. And sometimes we get in our own way, and we sort of have to put those ideas behind us and just be brave, right? Just be really brave. Okay, my next question is for Naila. Naila, careers in STEM and computer science are critical in shaping the world we live in and solving some of the biggest challenges. However, despite the high priority placed on these subjects in schools, only a fraction of girls and women are likely to pursue them. I would love to hear from you on how you can, your ideas on how we can attract more girls and young women to STEM, and what we can do to help them for success, so more girls choose careers in tech.
Yeah, for sure. So I think it's all about approaching exposure in another way, because we need to be exposed to the future and exposed to more interesting things in STEM, but it also can't stop there. So right now in school, the problem is we have to learn something, and it's just for the mark a lot of the time. But we need to be able to do things at our own speed, on our own terms, not be confined. And we need to make sure that after exposure comes building. That's where we're getting it wrong. We need to actually apply our knowledge, because that allows a connection and for us to have competency and fall in love with areas and find passions. So with me within science, the most time I've ever put toward this has been when I'm actually interested in something. And my passion for STEM rooted from my science fair, where I got to work with a problem I wanted to solve. And I learned about these advanced statistics, and there were strict rules. And then that led me to getting a scholarship into the Knowledge Society. And now I basically put all my free time towards STEM for my own learning, through reading papers and networking and building experiments, not just memorizing facts. And now it doesn't feel like work, it feels like fun. So how we get to this mindset is by exposure, building, and finally passion. Because passion will take it from there and is really key to success. So long story short, I think we need to change the why behind what we are doing in schools, from getting good grades to wanting to make real impact in fields that we are truly interested in.
I love that. And I think of sort of being an HR leader in Microsoft, and some of the we try to do, and you know, when we're bringing talent in, are the existing folks that we have in our team, and giving them a platform to really follow their passions and really drive work in areas that, you know, that they view as critical and important to them. So, but I love your perspective on that. Sure. So thank you. And I understand you were sharing that you have a book coming out. So I really want to wish you good luck on your book, Naila. That's fantastic. I definitely a lot of passion, and so just seeing that come to life for you. At this point, what we'd like to do is we're going to open it up for some questions. So please put your questions into the chat window. And we'd love, again, please, we'd love to hear from you. And again, the folks here would love to share some of their perspectives for sure. Oh, actually, I'm going to have another, question that came to mind for me, and I'm going to actually ask it to all four panelists. And the question really is, what is your one piece of advice that you'd actually have for the folks listening on the call today? And so what we're going to do is we're going to start with Holly, and then we'll end with, so go ahead, Holly, what would be your one piece of advice that you would offer?
My one piece of advice is to never apologize and never ask for permission to do something that truly inspires you, and to feel comfortable, you know, with progress, and you know, having lots of fun building stuff and breaking stuff.
I love it.
That was more than one, but I gave it.
No, it's great. Kristina.
You know, so mine kind of falls into the same line as what Holly was saying, and it boils down to not being afraid to go after what you're interested in, and I mean that in the context of, you know, applying for different jobs. If you look at the list of the requirements for the job you're applying for, and you know, maybe only have 5 out of 10, that's okay. Apply anyways. There tends to be a trend for women to not apply for a role unless they have all 10 requirements, or at least, you know, 95%. And oftentimes that will hold you back, because, you know, you might have something, you might bring something to the team that is really desperately needed, and it may not be on that particular job application, but, you know, apply anyways, and then, you know, present yourself, and don't let the fear of having only 50% of the requirements hold you back.
Great. Naila.
Yeah, I think my top tip would be embracing failure, because a lot of us are afraid of failing. But what I like to do is think of the best and worst case scenario. So if we take mentoring, for example, the worst case scenario is that when we reach out, this person says no, and nothing in your life really changes. But if they say yes, then you get this really cool connection, you gain a ton of knowledge, you potentially get opportunities. And so the benefit is so much greater than the downside. And I've now been mentored by a professor who was netted for his work in photonics, and people from Commonwealth Fusion Systems, and the CEO of NanoExplore. Did I think these people would even respond to me when I reached out? No. But now they mentor me, and I've gained so much, and it's helped me to get a lot of super cool opportunities and get feedback from experts so I can actually grow. And a big example for failure for me was when I was trying to get my book published, I got rejected by hundreds of agents. And if I just stopped because it got hard, then I never would have gotten my contract. So just go out, network, get your hands dirty, build experiments, get non-sugar-coated feedback. Just go for it, because you will grow a lot, and start now, because it's never too early to start. And now I want to fail, and we all need to learn to want to fail. So just put the fear behind you, because if you don't need it, failure equates to growth.
I love it. I think we're all the message is sort of consistent here from everyone's advice, and it's this idea of be fearless, right? And really tackle challenges, and if you're going to fail quickly, but learn from them and continue to grow. And I love that. Okay, so we actually have a few questions that are coming up, and so that came up through the chat. And one of the questions here is, we're focused a lot on women in technical roles, but how can we also support women in non-technical roles, such as women in marketing? So I might go first, and then maybe I'll ask Kristina to maybe share her thoughts, and maybe open it up to either, Naila, we'll see if you have thoughts on that. But from my perspective, I think really the advice holds true whether you're in a technical role or a non-technical role. And I think what we're hearing and what we're trying to sort of amplify here is this notion of sort of networking, mentorship, in situations where you can talk about sort of what your interests are and sort of seek support and help. So I kind of view it as, like, again, I think that the topic is really women in tech, and knowing that we're challenged in that space, but I think the advice can really go along all roles. But anyways, let me just sort of see if the panel has any other thoughts on this. Kristina, what would be your advice?
Yes, I completely agree with what you said, Carolyn. I think this advice really applies to women in all areas of technology. I think it can be particularly difficult for women in non-technical roles, especially in places like conferences, where they, might be a little bit overlooked when the networking kind of comes about, or when you're trying to make connections and stuff like that. It can be quite difficult. I'd say, if you want to expand this to all women, not just technical roles. If you're in a technical role and you're in an environment where there's an opportunity to mentor somebody who's maybe not even in the same area as you are, then I would say that it makes sense to really allow the growth to kind of spread all over the place and bring them into your fold, basically.
I'm actually going to ask Holly for her thoughts, please. If you had any additional thoughts on the topic, on the question.
Yeah, I think everyone has said kind of things that I would love to echo, but has already been said. I think for me, my focus primarily was creating inclusive environments for women in. Oh, I'm getting a little crosstalk. Yeah. Okay. Creating inclusive spaces for women in hard engineering, or actually working as software engineers in industry. Tech is such a huge field. I mean, it's like, I kind of joke about this a lot. Like, it's kind of like, one of the similar buzzword level as AI. It totally is meaningless, but means everything as well. But I think ultimately, if you are interested in venturing into the wide and curious and wonderful multivalent world of tech, go for it, and find your squad, find your people, and just hold on to them.
All right. No, thank you. Naila, did you have thoughts on that?
Yeah, for sure. And I think this applies everywhere, but just putting emphasis on allyship and diversity. Having different outlooks and perspectives in the workplace is so important. And that doesn't only mean men and women, but also people of different ethnicities, races, the LGBTQ community, because that brings a ton to the table and will make a more informed and more successful workplace. And to do that, we need to make a comfortable environment for people from a variety of backgrounds to come together where they feel valued and welcome. And I think that's our responsibility as society, and it's going to be really key for the future, especially with emerging tech like AI.
Okay, so I actually think I have one more time for one last question. And the question that I have, it's actually from the window, from the chat room. And just give me a second here. And I'm going to actually ask this of Holly. Holly, do you often find yourself as the only woman in the room? And if so, how do you make your voice heard?
Well, I hope I don't find myself as the only woman in the room in every context, but I think in some, technical context, yes. I think primarily in, you know, let's say around the proverbial boardroom table discussing like highly technical topics, you know, usually involving some kind of subcategory of AI, yeah. But, you know, that is changing. And I think, you know, especially as, you know, in my current role as I mentioned, like an AI, you know, engineering director, I find it is my duty to have hard D&I metrics that I need to hit from a hiring perspective, just to build more inclusive teams who inevitably end up building more inclusive AI models. But yes and no, right? I think you kind of just deal with it. And I'm sure that Kristina, you know, can echo my sentiments here, especially within the you know, InfoSec community, which is primarily male dominated. In terms of, you know, how do I deal with it? I'm a kind of a very logical thinker. I always go back to the work itself. I kind of return to technical topics. I don't try to dwell on, you know, emotional reactions. If you can kind of be logical and speak to the craft, and your work inevitably speaks for itself. And I think just being really vocal about your accomplishments, which is really hard for women to do, but to be vocal about your technical accomplishments, to be not afraid, to be loud and to be bold and to be brave. You always have to remember, you know, be brave, not perfect. And I think, you know, if you can remember that and take it with you in different contexts, I think you'll be okay.
Yeah, and I love what you said on sort of you being vocal yourself on really calling the topic out and sort of working with your team and bringing awareness to it. And I think that's so critical. Actually, we're out of time. I can't believe that the time has gone by so quickly. This has been an incredible discussion, and thank you for sharing your insights, not only with me, but for those that joined us today. So thank you very much, Holly, Kristina, and Naila, for really contributing to such an important topic. I'd say when we talk about diversity and inclusion, it's really a never-ending journey. And at Microsoft, I would say it's really a holistic approach. It's about steady progress. This means really coming from it from a variety of different places within our company and at different points where we can sort of enter the talent life cycle and make a career choices or paths or obviously trajectory. And what I'd love to share with you is that Microsoft actually publishes our diversity and inclusion report. And in that report, we share our lessons learned, we hear from our employees on their experience. So it's actually a great resource. And I'd also like to share that Microsoft is actually hosting Microsoft Include, which is a topic on D&I, and that conference is going to be on March 17th, so please sign up. But again, I hope you enjoy the rest of Ignite, and thank you for joining us today.